Uh, Nice to meet you, actually. Greg Beecher. I've been a huge box lacrosse fan since watching my very first FireWolves game.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's good. It's funny. Like now, a lot of times you meet people, it's like virtual through like Google Meet or Zoom. It's like, hey, nice to virtually meet you.
Yeah,
The world we're going in.
yeah. It's unfortunate, but it does provide some opportunities, like to be able to sneak these in pretty quick. So,
Yeah. How'd you like when you went to the game? I'm assuming it was last year at some point in time. Like, how'd you like find out about it and start to like dive into it?
so I played lacrosse in college years ago, community college out in upstate New York, and then basically didn't have anything to do with lacrosse. And then when the a buddy of mine was working for a beer distributor, and he got some free tickets to the Firewolves, and I had just gotten back into it. I was coaching my nephew in field, and I
Yeah.
was like, "Oh, I've never seen that," so I did a little research, and I was like, "Wow, this looks awesome." And my first game was the party zone, and of course that was like COVID still. So my nephew, who couldn't even get to go, who was supposed to go with me, me and my wife went, and it was that, your home opener was insane for,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, the fights and everything. It's probably good the nephew didn't go.
Yeah, but you guys had me and my wife hooked from that point on, and
That's awesome.
yeah, and that's actually one of my favorite parts too. It just so happened, like, I was a big defensive guy, so like
Mhm.
your team and like that whole style that you guys play is my favorite style. Like that hard nose, fast transition, setting up, but just like keeping the shots to the outside, the high pressure defense. I love it.
Yeah, it's kind of a little bit different. A lot of people like to use like a pressure down defense where you try to get them at like low angles. And what's happened is that a lot of people kind of like started running their offenses to be more successful against that. So our defensive coordinator, Clem, like 3 years ago, kind of changed that. And he's more like on analytics and where our goalie makes saves from. He's like, if we can pressure him, but rather than force him down, like force him over the top and try to get him to shoot here, we'll be a lot more successful and still utilize like our athletes we have on the back end. And no one else really runs that defense. It's like a little bit different. There's maybe like one or two variances, but everyone kind of does either like a pack it in defense or they do like kind of that pressure, drive you down low, stay behind you, have help low defense.
Yeah, and like you're saying, that is such a complimentary style to have in Dougie down there because he's such a big body. It just works so good, and to see it like when it plays so well, and even like last year, the end of the year, a lot of people, and myself included, we drove out to Buffalo, so we were disappointed. But I wasn't that disappointed because you guys held Buffalo essentially to 7 goals, and then it got a little, different with some of the stuff at the end. But like, wow, that was such an impressive feat to hold that offense to
Yeah, I'm with you. Like I think when you have Dougie, he can do a lot, and it's crazy. Like he even lost like I would say like at least 30 or 40 pounds during like COVID. So he came back like in better shape and stuff. And I think he actually in the beginning of last year had to understand how to play, like being a little bit lighter, which he hasn't been in a long time. But yeah, I looked at that Buffalo game, and they were averaging like 14, maybe almost 15 goals a game.
yeah.
And when we played them the last two times, we're like, we can play with these guys. It was a game the first time up in Buffalo. It was back and forth. It was tied until like 10 minutes left in the game. And then when obviously they played us, it went to overtime. And then when we went back there for the playoffs, it was like 2-2 at half. And yeah, it was like we gave up 7 or 8 goals. I think they scored 10, but the last two were empty netters. And you're like, hey, if you would have told me they're only going to score 8 goals, I'd be like, we're winning the game. If they were going to score nine, I'm like, we're going to win the game. Or even 10, I'm like, hey, like, we'll score 11, we'll get 10 to 11, or it's going to be another close game. But I think that helped. That was one of the reasons that they made the moves they made is because, like, we only could score 5 goals or 6 goals against Buffalo. And I think that's when they realized, like, we need to kind of make some adjustments.
Yeah, kind of switching away from the one man show to like more of a team style offense, and I think it's huge. I love that. Obviously, the you can't argue with the results of that first game.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was great to see, and personally for myself, I was only at our first training camp. That's the way it is like every year because of my work schedule. Um, I work on those weekends in November. It's part of my job, and it's a huge part of my job. So I had to kind of hear secondhand on how our offense was doing and certain guys. And after like the second weekend, like first 2 weekends, it was like building, and then the last 2 weekends, people kept saying great stuff, and they're feeling very optimistic, and kind of to see the fruits of the labor come to fruition that first game, and those guys scoring 10 goals was huge. I mean, we only had 1 goal out of the back end, which was Colton, but for those guys to give us 10 goals and not come from just one stick, I think makes you a very dangerous offense when it's multiple guys that can score 2 or 3 goals a night, rather than, last year we had to rely on Joe to kind of carry us every game. I think that's like extremely beneficial, and it puts the defense in a tough spot. So they started off hot, and I just hope they can continue that, next week and moving forward as they start to continue to play together more.
Yeah, and that being said, that was one thing you kind of touched on there. Colton Watkinson, when he scored, I was going nuts because like I'm that nerd, and so when he came down and scored that goal, I was going nuts in my house. I was just like so fitting. But on that being said, that was your only transition goal, which was where you guys were getting so many other goals. I mean, it was definitely.
Yeah, and even for us as defense, like, it'd be nice when one of our there's 10 guys that suit up. So if we get one of us that scores, like that's all you can really ask for. But a lot of what we need to do is just create opportunities. And if we don't score, then we're it's a 3-on-2 that one of our offensive guys scores. And that's how, a lot of times offense comes to be, not necessarily the D guy's gonna score. And Colton, ironically, it's like, I don't know, maybe like 8 or 9 minutes in the game, he turns to me and he goes, "Big, like if I'm free from the key bank center, like coming down transition, I'm gonna let one go." So in the second and fourth, it's at Buffalo. It's a lot better for lefties coming down in transition, as they have like kind of their side. And the next thing you know, his first opportunity where he was free and no one picked him up, and it was like kind of quasi fast break. He's planted his feet from the key bank center, and he just shot as hard as he could 5 hole, and it went in. And that's when I grabbed him, and I was like, "You son of a bitch, you were right. Like you called your shot and you scored." And it ended up being massive for us. That goal was kind of like what we needed, to give us like a little cushion. So funny how that worked out. Him calling his number and then scoring.
Yeah, it is. And like I said, those are always like such emotional goals when the D guys get up the floor. It's like when especially John LaFontaine, when he comes down and sets a pick is just like one of my favorite things because you said it kind of as a fast break style. It's not really a complete fast break because he runs, sets the pick for the other guy coming across, but like it's just the energy you guys pick up from that is so awesome.
Yeah, and if you watch Laffy run down, it's like Fred Flintstone with his feet, because he doesn't take long strides or like these short, fast strides. And then he's pumping his arms and he gets down there, and he's got a great stick. He knows how to play, and he's very smart. So that when he comes down there, like he knows what he's doing, and he's going to get guys open and get them good looks. And that gets like everybody fired up. And the O guys and the D guys, and it just makes everyone kind of be more contagious around them with the scoring and the energy.
Yeah, I mean that is a huge thing. Transition goals, D goals, like you said, just seeing the big guys come down the floor and they're just like going down, and now it adds such another element to it too, because then you've got the guy wondering, is he trying to just set a pick on me? Oh wait, no, he's trying to make a play here. Now we got to pay attention to.
Yeah, the best is when you do go down there and you want to help the O guys and get them free. Like their job is to score, but if they somehow the guy that's playing defense really works around your pick and tries to extend on the O guy, well, you better be ready to get the ball thrown to you and then get a good shot on that. So we have a lot of great players on the back end that have great sticks, and obviously have experience playing offense as well. So I'm confident in anyone going down there and scoring.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason you guys are in the NLL. That whole, and it was nice to see that your main core of defense, like even though you guys did have a lot of moving parts and stuff, you had basically the same core of defensive guys that you guys have had.
Yeah, and I mean we lost Anthony Malcolm, who's been awesome for us the last 2 years. He's playing a little bit closer to home. He lives in Tennessee, but we feel like with Aaron Foster is a very kind of similar player, kind of there in transition and getting the ball and then bringing it down the floor as fast as possible. So you're kind of just trying to swap guys in, and I think the coaches in the front office knew that, like, hey, this is like our backbone, and this is really good. This core, maybe add 1 to 2 guys in, because we all know how each other play, And when you're playing with those guys and you're comfortable playing with them and the system and style that you play, the comfort level is really easy of knowing guys' strengths and weaknesses. And then also too, like, there's more there's kind of like a little bit more desire playing with someone that you know and you really care about and not letting those guys down.
Yeah, building those relationships. Speaking of which, now you have been with this organization for a very long time because essentially this was the organization that you've been two moves with them. Is that correct?
Yeah, through Philly to New England, New England now to Albany. My first training camp with this team was in 2010. So technically, what's that, 13 years ago?
Yeah, so you're definitely doing something right, and you guys, and that in itself is a huge thing. I mean, just to have 13 years, and I mean, you actually have what 14 years in now, but just to have 13 years, even in any aspect of life, to be able to have 13 years with one company and one outfit's pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty wild thinking about it. I was talking about it, Greg Downing. He's been playing just as long as I have, and it's like wow. I think it's like summer of 2008 was when I played MLL. Was my first season there. So like, and then the fall of '08 was my first camp. So 15 years of playing professional lacrosse, including COVID in there, is pretty crazy. Like I would never thought that would have been the case when I was 22 years old. But I really like me. Mike French was our kind of main owner in Philly and carried over. He's still here with the FireWolves, on like kind of a lesser part, but he was always good and fair to me and someone that I always looked up to and trusted. And so I had a conversation with someone this week that just even getting Glenn Clark in there 7 years ago was huge. I mean, we were not in a good position when we first got to New England. The team wasn't good, and we weren't that talented. We didn't have great coaching. And then when Glenn Clark kind of came in, like he turned the ship around for the better. And I think that was huge too. And then they started getting better guys in and better players and better people. If that didn't happen, there's no way that I would have stayed with them. Um, for that long because then Philly came back and then there's New York and I was a free agent multiple times. So I could have easily left, but a lot of those guys that were in the locker room obviously played a massive part. And then also too, like our front office ownership and coaches too did for me.
Yeah, I mean yeah, like you said, the proof's in the pudding there, and even so, that just having the patience for the ownership group to stay with a philosophy and a plan to start to see it come together. That's not something you have a lot in pro sports. So it's really cool when you start to see it come together. And I think COVID kind of screwed up a little bit of Albany's year last year with the fans. I'm hoping I mean, I know a lot of guys who have bought season tickets just off seeing a couple of the games. So
Yeah, I hope like I think COVID and the restrictions there in the beginning wasn't great, but I think the more people kind of come, they see the game, and they appreciate it, and there's more kids, especially in that capital region, that are playing box. There's more people that are like teaching it now, which I think that helps. And there's guys on our team that now live there, so there's like 3 or 4 guys that live about 20 minutes outside of Albany that are going around and doing different stuff in the community. So I think that's extremely beneficial as well when you have boots on the ground that are teaching it at the grassroots level, and people now can have a name to the face. So the more that our organization does from off the field, I think we'll lead more people coming in through the doors to watch us on the floor.
yeah, hands down. I mean, and that is one thing the Firewolves program has been excellent about is they reached out to everybody. They let everybody's leagues in the. I mean, and I'm about an hour north, and they were coming up into our area and putting on clinics and just getting some FaceTime with these kids, which these kids is huge, and then they get to go watch them. And being on ESPN Plus, that's the other thing. It kind of opened the market up. You're starting to get a lot of guys who had the subscription for other things, and now all of a sudden they're seeing it, and it's like, oh, because that's a big thing I think holds you guys back is the paywall behind playing.
Yeah, I agree. And even I bet like maybe I think there's a game tonight. So tonight, like I could sit at my house with my wife and we have Hulu, and I could put on like Hulu and watch ESPN Plus and watch a game. And then when I'm watching film, it could be Sunday when I get home. I could easily just be sitting on my couch, like doing treatment, and I'm watching film of games of either our game or whoever we're playing this week. So I think like that's extremely beneficial. It's just the more visible and more accessible it is to the fans, it helps because then they'll be able to watch away games, and if it's a home game and they can't make it for whatever reason, they can throw it on their TV, and then the next thing you know, it becomes accessible, and they're still supporting. And there's not a ton. It's like the NFL. I tell people we only have 9 home games, and we only have 18 games total. So it's not like, oh, this is a 2 to 3 weeks thing like it's hockey or the NBA. Every game is extremely important, valuable to us on that week to week basis. So you got to kind of get like looped in and watch and pay attention and really try to understand. But as a player, there's nothing more you love than fans that are into it and bring that environment because there's plenty of places we go play where like this sucks. Like there's no juice in here as an away guy. And guys like playing in those environments that are hostile because it just raises up your game. And you're like, this is why I play, one of the reasons. And this is what professional sports is about, is going in there and being heckled and people giving you the finger and putting their thumbs down and calling you names. Like that brings you more motivation. And when you sit down after a game, you're like, that was awesome when you can win in those environments like last week.
Yeah, yeah, that's got to be amazing. Part of me wishes I was there, but I'm not so sure because when we went to the last one, I had my FireWolves jersey on, and they weren't bad because I think they won, so it was a little. They were pretty polite about it. But the best was as we're leaving, this little kid, he's like 8 years old. He comes up, he's like, "That's right, losers walk," and he just, yeah, it was that
There was
Buffalo.
a Buffalo's got a crowd, they got fans. I hate going to Buffalo just because like it's always dreary, it's freezing cold. Um, we used to stay in a horrible hotel. It's gotten better over the years. They switched hotels. Their locker room is better, but they always bring the fans. And even last week, there's a guy who was probably he had to be in his 30s or 40s, and every time there's a timeout or something, he just kept like giving us the finger behind the bench. He's like keeps flashing it up there and everything. I'm like, you obviously have had too many Labatt Blues, but I'm like, this is I wasn't acknowledging him, but I'm like, that's kind of cool, and you get used to it.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. I'm hoping we can get some of that energy brought down into Albany this year. That would be sweet.
I would be.
Now, my you work in the lacrosse industry full time though, is that correct?
Yeah, the company I work for it's called Next Sports. It's spelled NXT, but yeah, so I do that full time. I'm our VP of Sales and Recruiting, so I oversee all of our boys lacrosse tournaments. We have 39 of them throughout the course of the year. We also have 5 like individual showcases, like recruiting showcases too, where kids go and we put them on teams. They play in front of college coaches. So it's very busy for me certain times of the year. So between June and July, every weekend, I have an event. A lot of times, like I'll be traveling to them as well. The majority of them are in the Mid Atlantic region, but we also have events as far west as Dallas, Texas. As far south now as Naples, Florida. I go to Naples, Florida in 2 weeks for an event. And as far north as New Haven, Connecticut, we have an event that we run in partnership with Andy Shea of Yale. So June, July are very busy for us, and October, November. That's why I miss training camps. And then we have a few tournaments in the winter, box ones, which are really cool. Chicago, Philadelphia, New Hampshire, Connecticut, and Virginia Beach are our box events. We run a spring league. We also run a spring training for high school programs. So we're very busy on the boys side. We have a whole girls events division. They got like 20 events that they do, and then we have boys and girls club teams. And between those club teams, there's over 30 of them here in the Philadelphia area. So very busy. It's like there's always more stuff going on. I'm very fortunate enough that they allow me to play professional lacrosse. But also every year there's like more on my plate from the work side. So kind of makes juggling them a little bit tougher. But very supportive, and I'm fortunate enough that I love what I do. I love the game of lacrosse. It's opened up many things for me, and it's how I met my wife and a lot of my best friends, and it's how I feed myself and my family. So it's really cool that I get to do that. On a day to day basis. It's lax, lax, lax all the time, and right now I love it. So I can't really complain.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's got to be Yeah, that's so cool to be able to, like you said, you do it all the time. I'm sure sometimes when you're flying, you're like, oh, the travel gets a little tough, but
Yeah, I mean, it does. You get used to it, and I've been to all these places. The good thing is, like, I have a routine. I know where I like to eat, where I like to go. Like, I know every airport like the back of my hand. It's just that in the winter, we're traveling to Buffalo, to Rochester, to Toronto, to Albany. When you wish it was like, oh, this week I'm in Nashville, and then I'm in, San Diego. Then it's Phoenix and Seattle. So you don't have the luxury of some of those other great cities, such as the other sports. But after 15 years, I'm used to it, and it is what it is. But I'm very fortunate. I've been able to travel all over North America for free and visit and see a lot of these cities and piggyback trips on them as well. Like last year when we played in Vancouver, my wife flew out and we skied in Whistler for 3 days. And we got really lucky. It snowed like 3 feet of snow. So you're able to kind of extend trips on them if you want to and kind of make the most of it. So I've been very fortunate and to use that to my advantage as well to kind of see all of North America where a lot of my peers and friends haven't been able to. The game of lacrosse has given me a lot, way more, off the field than I would have expected.
yeah, lacrosse seems to be crazy like that. Now, did I read right? You're from Newtown, Connecticut?
Newtown,
Oh,
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. Well, either
Yeah,
way,
it's
still not a generally lacrosse hub, especially a box lacrosse hub.
No, not at all. Newtown, PA is in Bucks County. I literally grew up in my parents' house backed up to a farm. So it was a ton of farmland there. It's right next to Washington Crossing, which is where literally George Washington crossed the Delaware River to sneak up on Christmas, I think it was Christmas morning. So to sneak up on the Brits, which is really cool. So there's a lot of history there. But yeah, like so Philadelphia, the way it's made up for lacrosse is that there's a river that runs kind of like through the city, and it's called the Schuylkill River. It's hard for people outside of Philadelphia to pronounce it the way it's spelled, but it's pronounced as Schuylkill, even though it's probably you would think it's Schu you kill. And the one side of the Schuylkill is an area called like the Main Line, and a lot of lacrosse, very good lacrosse players grew up there, and that's where a lot of the coaches are and stuff like that. And I grew up on the other side of that river, so there really wasn't lacrosse. We were very good in football and in basketball and kind of like traditional sports, but lacrosse was in its infancy there. So I didn't start playing lacrosse till 8th grade, and then from there I kind of grew and loved it. And when I was in high school, it afforded me opportunities to go play at the next level at schools I would have never thought I could have. So it's I think I was the first player from my area to play Division One lacrosse in my county. So it's kind of wild to think that, and there's a lot more kids that are playing it now there. But yeah, it's not a lacrosse hotbed whatsoever. It's still growing there, and it's just great to be able to come from there and know like what it was and where it is now. So great place to grow up. Certainly not a lacrosse hotbed whatsoever, but proud to say and be where I was from.
Yeah, and I mean, you can say it's not a hotbed, but you've made a 15-year career you know, out of it. So that kind of stuff is what gives kids the chance. Like, because then when they watch it, they're like, I know he came from this town. He showed me it can be done.
Yeah, I sometimes when I give speeches, I like have kids raise their hands. I'm like, hey, who here is under the age of like 14? And majority of the kids raise their hand. I'm like, that's when I picked up a lacrosse stick. So, like, if I can do it, like, you can do it. Yeah, there's God given abilities and talent I have, which I'm bestowed upon me, which I'm very fortunate for. But I'm like, that's usually with work ethic and talent, like, you can do anything. Because when I was 14, I was really good at basketball and I was really good at soccer, but I wasn't good at lacrosse. So I had that mentality to be like, I need to be good at this. Like, that kid's better than me, and this kid's better than me, and that kid, like, there's no way. So it was just like coming down to work ethic and trying to not just prove people wrong, it's to prove myself right that I could do it. And I was very fortunate that I had like an incredible family and two awesome parents. My parents are like the backbone of me that supported me and did everything they could to make me successful and when I was playing sports and taught me the right way to play them. So Yeah, it's very cool to kind of look back at now and be like, oh, I started playing this game at 14, and I wasn't even playing box. First time I played box, I was 22. So to pick up on that when you're playing against men who have been playing for their whole lives, this like different game for an American uh, was tough. But at the end of the day, too, like I was there with other Americans, and you literally had to pick the game up and make an impression in 3 weeks to make the team, and then I guess like the last 15 years, like kind of wrote my own history of it.
Yeah, that's huge because now that I'm getting into the sport, what I found is I cover the Utica Yetis, the NABLL, and a couple other like minor leagues basically. And there's not a lot of American players. Like all the American players that I'm meeting just started playing it. Like you said, 21, 22. Some of these guys are 30 before the first time they've ever picked up a box.
Yeah, I think now it's going to be very. You won't see many 22, 23-year-old kids who they don't have any experience playing it. We have our own box program down here in Philly called the Philly A's. One of my good buddies, Steve Holmes, runs another program in Philadelphia called LAX. There's different box clubs that are in Jersey, Long Island, Connecticut. So there's every kid should have an experience or probably has played box to some extent, whereas 10 or 15 years ago, a bunch of Americans we didn't. And even so, there's college box leagues in America now, and it's more visible with watching it too with the ESPN Plus and everything. So even if they haven't played it, they probably have watched it. And at some point in time, if they haven't played it, they will play it. So that's how I look at it, and I think that's great. We just still need to get more kids playing the game, and it's only going to benefit it's only going to benefit their game because once you do play it, it's like so fun. I would say 9 out of 10 kids that play it end up like falling in love with it. So
Yeah, that was really cool. Well, thank you so much for your time. I won't steal too much more of it, but if you guys are ever looking to stream any of your kids tournaments that are in upstate New York, get a hold of me because that's basically all I'm doing now is streaming until I figure out my back's all jacked up so I can't work now. So that's how I got into all
uh,
this. You guys showed up and then basically because of your team, Lax and I got their tournament streamed because
that's awesome.
I fell in love with box lacrosse, and my son, who doesn't play sports at all, but he loves going down to the FireWolves games with me, and he's the one who taught me all this media stuff, and was like, "Yeah, it's not that hard, Dad. I'll teach you." And
That's pretty cool. I watched that show Wrexham. Have you been watching that show with like Ryan Reynolds when they bought the soccer team?
no, I have to check it out.
Yeah, it kind of hit home for me on one of the last episodes. They were talking about just how powerful it is when it's a community there, and relationships when the dads bring their kids to the game and different generations that have gone. And I was kind of getting like a little emotional watching it because that hit home for me when my dad would take me to Sixers and Flyers games growing up and Phillies games like that. Those are some of my best memories of like my mom dropping me off at my dad's work and then us going right there to go down to South Philly and knew I was going to get like an ice cream and a Sixers t-shirt and spend time with just my dad. Those are some of my fondest memories I have as a kid was through sports and watching sports with my dad and like seeing him, support him and everything. Like, that's something I hope I can bestow upon like my kids and forge that same relationship. So hopefully we can do that with you and the Firewolves.
Yeah,
That
no,
would be cool.
you have 100% done it. You'll see us. We sit up in the back of the party zone. We got season tickets. Talk to the other team's goalies, cheering on Dougie.
I'll look for you. Make
Yeah,
sure I'll try to throw a ball to your son. Few
oh,
balls a game.
yeah, that would be sweet. But yeah, we've tried to start basically every time the away team or you guys score, yelling that it was all the goalie's fault. I tried to explain to my kids, I was like, all goalies are head cases. I was like, it's just the crazier they are, usually the better they are. And I was like,
That's right.
if you can get into that headspace a little bit, so
Oh, that's smart. Yeah, they're always a little kooky. If you're going to stand in there and take balls 90, 100 miles an hour and just soak them, there's a screw loose with you somewhere. So,
or two. But
yeah.
awesome. Thanks a lot again, and I'll see you on the 17th.
Yeah, look for you next week.